Welcome to The Law Matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program has been created, as we tell you, to educate, inform, and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to decide how to protect yourself, your family, and your business. We continue to provide information and resources that'll help you decide whether or not you need or want to contact a lawyer. Perhaps will help you to determine that you might actually be able to handle some issues yourself. If you do decide that you need professional counsel, you'll be better prepared, and of course, so will the professionals that you contact. That's our goal, for you to save time, money, and achieve the best possible results. The Bazar and Associates law firm in East Providence continue to help us by donating their time, energy, and expertise. We want to, as always, welcome and thank Attorney David Bazar. Not surprisingly, our topic today is about hurricanes and storm insurance. In terms of hurricane headaches, Harvey still isn't over, and now we have Irma, and that is a record breaker and a heartbreaker for many in Florida. I guess we want to begin by saying our thoughts and our prayers continue to be with all of those people in those areas. Today, the legal answers and some information that you need as you have to handle insurance questions, what's going on, what you need to know, some questions that you may have, we may be able to answer, and hopefully we can point you in the right direction. So I understand that legal aid organizations, at least in Texas, are in place now to serve as first responders, or had served as first responders, to give some pro bono assistance just for the immediate issues. So whether you're Texas, Irma, and Florida, what do you think people are supposed to do once they're out of harm's way? They need to have insurance, and some of them do and some of them don't. What do you suggest, David?
And don't forget all the people in the Caribbean islands that were affected too.
Yes,
so,
thank you.
Insurance in these situations is actually an interesting area of the law, and what's covered and what's not. And first and foremost, before any of these things happen, it's always a good idea to speak to an insurance agent or somebody to find out what you would be covered for in the event something like this happened. Because homeowners insurance, for example, oftentimes has exclusions for certain things such as hurricanes and that type of thing, and then the different components of damage that can be caused by a storm, such as, is it wind damage, is it flood, what caused the damage to your property, what caused you to be in the situation you're in. Some things are covered and some aren't, and it's important to know what type of insurance you have and what you might need to supplement it.
I guess some people actually even have some marine coverage and things of that nature, so it's a good idea, obviously, to ask the questions before you need to, and we've certainly heard that it's worthwhile to do that. But this has been catastrophic and unprecedented, so even if you didn't have flood insurance per se, and many don't, for many it could be $25,000 a year, and save that for 4 years, you're on your way to rebuilding your own home. But not to say that you shouldn't have insurance. But what about the tangential things that happen? Even if you didn't have flood insurance, if the wind knocks down your neighbor's something, is that not secondary, and is that not something that an insurance company would cover even if they didn't cover the flood that went through your front door?
So most homeowners policies do cover wind damage. Sometimes you need a rider or a supplement to your policy to have that type of coverage, but that is coverage that is usually available and not either at any additional expense or not at a large expense. As you say, flood insurance can be very expensive and usually only available through the FEMA type of policies that you can get flood insurance for, where they are based on flood maps and all sorts of different things that go into that, and it's backed by the government, and it does create sometimes very high premiums for the area that you may live in if it's flood prone. So going back to the wind, yes, that's usually covered, and usually at not a great deal of expense in addition, if any. And so if your house is damaged in a storm and the damage is caused by the wind, then usually you will get coverage for that.
And the water, you might not have flood damage, but suppose it does other kinds of damage. It puts your business out of business. It puts mold in places that you shouldn't have had mold. And are those things something that insurance typically covers? Not that you're an insurance agent, David, even though you're a legal
I do
counsel.
practice law that deals with insurance a lot, and I can tell you it always goes back to what is the policy language and what are the exclusions, and whether or not the Wind-driven rain is included as opposed to flood.
Good
You know,
point.
it could be an issue that can be argued, and as a lawyer, we're always looking at the language, and we always say that the insurance company drafted the language, so if we're trying to protect the homeowner or the person, the business trying to make the claim, we try to make sure that the language is used in a way that gives you the most coverage, affords the greatest coverage to the individual, and puts the insurance company who drafted the language most at risk for bearing whatever the words are that aren't quite clear. So long and short is we always would look at things to try to make a claim in the aftermath of a storm or a damage to someone's property. But again, it's best to make sure before it happens that you've reviewed the language with an expert and have obtained the best coverage that you can.
So, assuming that people, those who've gotten out, even if they don't even know what kind of damage or if there's damage, how much damage, what's the process? Could you give us a little checklist, or let's discuss that if we can, give people an idea about what they need to do. Let's hope that they all left with their very important documents on paper, on a flash drive. What should they do? Maybe they didn't have that documentation. What should we do, and how do we start?
So again, first and foremost, in any of these type of situations, you want to protect your family and yourself. So life first, property second. Then in terms of property that you're worried about that you couldn't take out, and obviously, as we're saying, you want to protect people first. So if it's just getting you and your family out, that's what you do. If you can take some things that are important, take them. But once it's out, you're out, and the damage has occurred, and now we're just trying to recover from that, there's a lot of different things that you can do. Certainly there are agencies in place, and those are the first place you should start. Your insurance coverage is covered, you know, that's usually through a broker or the insurance company, so you would contact your insurance broker or company. In terms of other things that may be available, there's all of the disaster Red Cross that might be in place, or other emergency management agencies that would be in place that you could contact and get some guidance from. If you have access to a computer, you can go on certain websites and get information as to where you apply and how you apply. One of the things you talked about was businesses in one of the earlier questions, and it doesn't even have to be a business. You could be a homeowner or a renter, and the SBA might have loan programs that are available to you to, once you get to the process of start recovering and rebuilding, whether it's personal property or real estate, there might be some low interest loans through the SBA that you're qualified to obtain.
Do you think that even if someone didn't have insurance, what recourse do homeowners or people have if they don't have insurance? FEMA still in place? Red Cross still going to help?
Possibly. And there are certain programs that may help you. Usually there's a limited amount of grants that you might be able to get to help recover. It's not the same as having insurance. They're not going to pay for your loss based on the loss and give you a total recovery. But there might be some things available, or it might be through the loan program, like through the SBA. And it's my understanding that it's always good to process that loan first and then see what other things you may be entitled to. And you might find out either through that process or through contacting the agencies directly what you're entitled to. But there are time limits for doing some of these things, so you want to start doing those things right away so you don't put yourself, even if you don't intend to borrow the money in the long run and you're hoping to get some help with it, so that you don't put yourself out of the time frame to be able to obtain those loans, you should apply for them.
So I can't imagine the amount of time that you'd spend or minutes you'd burn on your cell phone if you were out of your home and need to contact your insurance agent, you and millions of others who are in the same predicament. So perhaps some things they could do online, and they do tell you do it as soon as possible, even if you don't know what the damage is or if there's damage. Does that seem like a reasonable thing to do? And how do you even get to a computer these days if you're without power?
So it depends where you are and what you can do. But certainly, I think the sooner the better is good advice. And if you can do some things online, it's good advice. Once you're able to get back to your home and assess the damage and see what you really are up against, a lot of the insurance companies will send teams out to those areas, and certainly they might be able to help you immediately understand what your options are because they've dealt with these types of disasters before. So I think it's actually, once you're able to get into the home area and see what the situation is, then contact your insurance company and see if there's a disaster team in the area, or FEMA, and find out what other agencies or local emergency management agencies are available that might be able to help you go in the right direction.
Interestingly, and not surprisingly, in doing some preparation here, I noticed that it was advisable that if it were at all possible, notify your insurance company just to put them on notice. Whether you could or couldn't be in your home, whether you've seen your home or not, just put them on notice that there's probably some damage, just so that it's documented and in the works, not to mention that it might be, I don't know, is it a week? Is it 2 weeks before you can get down there? And speaking of which, suppose for our people who are in Rhode Island and Massachusetts who have property, maybe not in Texas, but at the very least Florida, they can't exactly take a little drive down there to check out their property. How do they handle that?
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
Well, exactly what you're saying. I would certainly immediately notify whoever needs the earliest notice. If it's your insurance company, yep, I have a home in whatever area of Florida that it might be, and this is a potential that there's damage to this. If you have friends or caretakers or somebody down there that you know who can then maybe at some point get out to see what's going on and let you know, because obviously to fly in and out even right now is not going to be easy. So find out as much information as you can from anybody you may know that's down there, or what other sources you might have to get information. But start with your own insurance company and say, here's what I know. They may actually be able to say, okay, well, we're going to get someone out there to start looking for you.
Oh, that's good to know. From a legal perspective now, I know we've had sessions when we've discussed what happens with personal injury and how much or the degree to which a homeowner might be at fault. If you can't get to your place, I understand that you're supposed to do everything you possibly can to clean out, but you shouldn't clean out until you can take pictures so that someone can know or have an idea about the damages. Perhaps there's a team that can be in place. But if I can't get there to that house, however many, whether it's 5 miles or 500 miles away, what kind of potential personal injury liability am I subjected to if I can't board up, but there's something floating in the yard that somebody could trip on or whatever? What's the barrier there? How do you work through that?
So with a personal injury claim, you're talking about comparative negligence, perhaps, and
Yes.
whether you contributed to the problem. Obviously, in this type of situation, that doesn't apply. It's not a
Good.
negligence claim. So there's no percentage of negligence that can be put back on you for what happened. However,
Good to know.
you do have a duty to mitigate damages, and that's a different situation. And so if there was an option or an opportunity that you had to mitigate the damages to your property and you didn't do anything to mitigate the damages, there can be some reduction in what you're able to claim and get for a recovery. So it's also, again, you know, what's a reasonable person to do? Well, you can't get there because there's no ability to get there, flight-wise or otherwise. Use the Florida Keys, for example. They're not letting people back
Yes,
in
exactly.
to the area. But if you do know people who are still there that might be able to help out or do something, then if you contact them or take efforts to do that, then you've done what a reasonable person could do, and whether you were able to mitigate the damages or not shouldn't be used against you.
So let's pursue that a little bit further, David. So even if I couldn't get to Florida and I have some concern about the property, I have a neighbor who either is there or can return there more quickly than I can. You always say document everything. Might it be considered to be supportive of a case, if I had one, if I asked Ron to go to my house and take a couple of cell phone shots? He either did it or he didn't do it. Maybe he lost his phone, whatever, but at least it shows that I tried to do something. Is that considered to be reasonable?
It is a good step. And hopefully Ron doesn't lose his camera and takes the pictures and sends them to you. And if he's able to secure some things for you and board something up or help out in that way, that's a good thing too. So the more that you can do, the better off that you are. And again, you only can do what you can do given the circumstances and what access you would have to an area. But it's always, and for your own peace of mind, it's a really good idea to try to get someone out there that you know as soon as possible to let you know what's going on.
Makes sense. What about if you are away from your home and you frankly don't have the power, don't have cash, don't have an ATM that's working, or maybe there isn't even money at the machine even if you went there? What do you do if you are in a situation where you have a family and you need roof over your head and food?
Red Cross.
Red Cross, always the first.
Yeah, or what, again, in the area, they have a local emergency management agency, or even if some other federal agencies on site, that's where you would start and see what help that they might be able to give you. There's a lot of disaster relief agencies that can help.
Is it reasonable to assume that if I could reach the insurance company, the agent, that I could ask him to go check my policy to see if there's some coverage or provision that would give me a few $100s, $1,000 to take care of my family?
Sure.
Forever,
There
whatever.
might be some shelter coverage that says if you can't live in your house, we'll provide some coverage for you to be able to stay in a hotel or somewhere for a period of time. A lot of policies do have some of that, but then again, we're going to get into why can't you live in the house? Is it wind damage? Is it flooding? What's the issue? I can't get back to my house. I don't even know my house is damaged. Is there coverage for that? That would be an interesting issue.
Long after the waters recede, we know that these crises are going to continue, and the insurance companies will be busy beyond imaginings. What beyond taking a picture should the homeowner do to get the process moving? Because as you said, the longer you wait, either you miss deadlines that you shouldn't, or the adjuster did or didn't get there, or something bad can happen because you didn't replace the whatever that's strewn in the yard or whatever. What's the next thing that should happen? How do you deal with that?
Well, if you can get access back to the property and you can have somebody start securing things, documenting the damages and that type of thing, of course, that's an important way to go. If there is coverage in your policy and you're not able to get an adjuster from the company out there to start working with you, there are public adjusters, and in certain circumstances, you might want to hire one, but be very, very careful with that, because sometimes they charge a percentage of whatever they recover for you, and you don't really need them to do that. But if it's a matter of saying, I'll pay you a certain fee for documenting what you see as damages, and I don't want you to do anything beyond that, it might be a helpful way to go.
I've understood that in the past, when there have been hurricanes, there's been issues about fraud and everything else. So now there's a very difficult situation between the victims, the insurance companies, and I know that there are many occasions when the insurance just wasn't adequate, or there were changed claims. Not nice. At what point does it matter for the victim to call a lawyer?
So actually, I would contact an attorney early on to see what rights I might have under my policy, to review the policy, just to get another set of eyes. You have your agent that can also tell you what they interpret, the insurance agent, as to what's covered in the policy, but it would be helpful to have an attorney look at that as early as possible.
Would you say that that's true for all homeowners? I mean, if you trust your insurance person, that's one thing, so you're not going to assume that they're trying to do something untoward. But even if they aren't bad, if you trust them, still they're working on their best interest. Does it mean that everyone should be enlisting a lawyer if they can afford one, to make sure that their interests are covered, even if they don't tell the insurance company? And understandably, many don't say that I have my lawyer on my team here.
Well, I would
What should happen?
I would at least consult with an attorney. You don't have to pay a great deal of anything for that. You could go through, if it was a Rhode Island situation, the Rhode Island Bar Association, and have a referral to an attorney for a free half-hour consultation. That might be very well worth it, at least to get pushed in the right direction, given the circumstances, and every circumstance can be a little bit different. So I don't think I think it's a good idea to have, if you're going through a disaster and you have the opportunity to have an attorney look at something for you and give you some pointers and put you in the right direction, I would recommend that in every circumstance.
Would you suggest that it's worthwhile to tell the insurance company that you have someone else on your team, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the circumstance. If they're working with you and you're not concerned about that, and you're just going to speak to the attorney just to make sure that you are being given the correct information and going in the right direction, you might not need to raise that. But if you feel that you're not being treated fairly and you want to make sure that you have some pushback or leverage, you could certainly use the fact that you have an attorney. And at that point, the insurance company may say, okay, well, then we're going to speak to the attorney, not you. So you have to weigh and balance where you are with your own personal circumstance.
Good point. So apart from insurance, other legal issues that come up. So if you are a long-term evacuee from your neighborhood and you can't get back to the house, maybe you can't get access to your checkbook and a way to pay your mortgage, you could, or pay other bills, you could end up with needing to file bankruptcy, you may lose your home, somebody wants to foreclose on. How do you stave all of that off so that you don't compound the problems that you have?
Again, that's certainly a thing that needs some expertise from an attorney who can help tell you, all right, here's the options, here's your circumstances, given the fact that you either do or do not have coverage for this loss, and the loss is a great loss, and you've got property that's encumbered by a loan that you need to keep from having a foreclosure on. There's a lot of opportunities that they can use the different rules of bankruptcy or otherwise to help you.
Could a lawyer actually step in and intervene with someone's credit card company so that they don't levy those finance charges and interest? Can you stave it off? Can you waive it? They can't even be in their house. Should they do that themselves? Should they have a lawyer do that?
I mean, certainly I would attempt to resolve some of those issues on my own. And if I'm not having any success at that point in time, I would probably contact an attorney.
And what about, again, if you were a long-term evacuee, or if you just had so many issues to deal with regarding these kinds of storms, whatever it was, a hurricane or a flood or whatever, you could lose a job. What if you do? Is that if we're employee at will, you lost your job because they needed to replace you? Is that a legal issue? Is that something that we're going to be looking at going forward here? And what do you do?
Well, let's just say, for example, you work in an area that was just devastated by a storm, and the company you worked at is no longer there. The business is gone because it was wiped out in the storm too. There is, again, we're talking some disaster relief, and there are other areas of disaster relief besides just the home and the property, jobs, employment, all of those things. There are agencies and programs that are out there to assist people who are going through those situations. So check with FEMA, check with online opportunities for agencies that provide services. It might be unemployment insurance. It might be some disaster unemployment situation that's out there and available to you. A lot of these things exist through these different agencies.
Can you be evicted if you haven't been able to make your rent for a month or 2 months because you've been gone? I feel badly for the landlord. I feel badly for the tenant.
They're going to be difficult situations. Can you be evicted? Well, is the building still there?
If it is, say it is.
Well, the building's there, but you can't get to it. Do you have to pay the landlord the rent? Well, I mean, on a legal basis, probably, but on a moral or practical basis, you'd have to look at each case and what the issues are and what the circumstances are. If you're in a place where you can't get back to the place that you live, your rent is still sort of required to be paid by law, but if you can't live there, let's look at the circumstances. What coverage does the landlord have in those circumstances? Does he have insurance that covers property that has been, say, damaged and now is uninhabitable? And does he have business interruption insurance or some such thing that might pay him while you're not there? Every circumstance is going to be a little bit different, and you'd have to look at each and every circumstance as it comes up.
And say insurance is doing its thing to help you as the landlord, you as the homeowner, you as the business owner. They helped, but it just isn't enough, and you know they just didn't assess it correctly. Is this what brings on what will be decades of lawsuits? And what do you do about that? When does that start?
Well, again, every situation has to be looked at for what are the particular circumstances that's involved. But it does have the potential for a lot of different lawsuits, for a lot of different things that cover a wide range of issues that come up in a disaster.
So should someone start, is that another reason that someone actually should have a lawyer, because it's more likely that there'll be less need to appeal and negotiate and renegotiate with insurance companies about what they didn't get paid if they know that there's a very big discrepancy between what was the real damage and what they're paying or reimbursing you for?
I think the hope of contacting the attorney early is to potentially avoid having to file a lawsuit later.
In Rhode Island and Massachusetts, are there legal aid societies that will help people who don't really have the ability to pay a lawyer for a full boat? Or
yeah, well, here's
how does that work?
Certainly, for example, the Rhode Island Bar Association has the volunteer lawyer program. I can tell you with certainty that if there were a disaster that hit Rhode Island and there were a situation where you need to get people to be able to talk to attorneys without charge early on, that the Bar Association might set up a special program or process to do that. So if there were a disaster in Rhode Island, for example, the Bar Association would let it be known to the public, here's how we can help, and we will put you in touch with a lawyer or give you an opportunity to speak to a lawyer without charge to figure out what you need to do and what services can be provided to you.
And considering, as I had mentioned earlier, you happen to be in Rhode Island or Massachusetts, you have property in Florida or Texas, is it still worthwhile to contact your Rhode Island-based lawyer and have them work with whomever else needs to be contacted in the area of the tragedy? Or
of course, the rules that are going to apply to interpreting the insurance contract in Florida are going to be Florida laws, if we're talking Florida. The damages that are being assessed are going to be assessed under the rules and laws of the area where the disaster happened. But if you start with your Rhode Island attorney, for example, or your Massachusetts attorney, they can tell you, okay, this is what I see, these are the issues, they can spot the issues for you, and perhaps if you don't have an attorney if it's Texas or Florida or whatever it is, they may be able to set you up with somebody who can help you find an attorney or with an attorney there.
Can a lawyer help an individual who's been victimized by these storms actually get access to cash, or is that just and only a bank that can help you do that? Because somewhere, if someone is out of a home and has those imminent needs to take care of for maybe not a week, but months on end, who should be enlisted first?
Well, you could contact an attorney who might be able to help point you in the direction of what agencies are available to give you relief, or maybe set you up with a bank or whatever to give you that help.
Sounds good. Well, we've certainly covered quite a few topics. We hope that this has been helpful to you. We hope that you and your families don't have too many issues to deal with. But we thank you for tuning into the Law Matters. Do stay tuned to Law Matters because it matters to you.